Muriel, hi. Thank you. And I'm one of the three co-chairs of the Aging and Community Committee, along with Susan Farber and Suzanne Gelber. And quite a number of months ago, we put out a survey, and one of the items that people sent back to us was an interest in housing. So this program, and a second one that I'll tell you about at the end of this program, really was born out of that interest in our community of learning more about housing. So we're thinking about this session really as an opportunity for people to think about what you most want and you think you most need if you are considering moving. We have a wonderful facilitator who I'm going to introduce, and guest speaker, who will walk us through a whole range of variables that we all need to think about in terms of what are we hoping to have if we are considering moving. So without further ado, let me introduce Marsha Frankel. I'll tell you a little about her. Marsha is a social worker, and her focus is on senior services, older adults. She retired from Jewish Family and Children's Service, where she was the clinical director of social services. And she's really involved in many more things than I've already said. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Marsha. And to the people who just joined, Fran, I think that's you, we're recording the session, okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Muriel. Welcome to everybody. It's nice to see all of you. So a lot of times when we think about the idea of moving, there are two schools of people. There are those who are the planners, and I'm guessing most of you are planners since you're on this talk today, and there are the reactors. And then there are those in the middle. Okay, Rachel, I saw that. But people who react to changed circumstances. So there are a couple of things that before we get into some of the various things to consider is you need to know whether you're moving with somebody, whether it's a partner, a sibling, a friend, because then it's two people that you have to be on the same page about. And also what your care needs are. And if it's two people, it can mean that you require different amounts of care, and that has to get considered as well. The other big overriding issue to be thinking about is finances. There is a wide range of options, and at your next talk on this topic, you're going to be hearing about housing options for older adults in the area. There is a wide range of what they cost. And one of the things you need to be thinking about is, are you concerned with leaving money to the next generation? Or are you okay with spending what money you have during your lifetime? As much as one can predict how that goes. So those are a couple of overriding issues. The other thing that may be on the list there, but let's throw it out at the beginning, is time frame. If you're looking to get into certain kinds of housing situations, it really does require planning. Some of the life care communities, those that have independent living, assisted living, and nursing home unit that you buy into, they can have 5-year waiting periods. If you're applying for affordable senior housing, their waiting list can be even longer. So this is a process, and it's great that you're all thinking about it now so that you know where we're going. So we're going to put up the list of variables, and I'm going to ask you all to take a moment and sort of jot down or remember what are the key things that you're thinking about and that are important to you. And there are other things that we can think about, but just take sort of a look at that. So, you know, there are things related to the staying near your current environment and being near friends and family. There are other things too. I've known of people who were only interested in staying within a 10-mile radius of their primary care physician or their dentist or a specialist that they were particularly attached to. So we all have different things that are important to us. And if you look at this, there's a whole bunch of them. And so just sort of take note, and these will be sent on to you if you like, so that you can keep it. But just be thinking about it now and react to what's sort of the first thing that pops up for you, of the first couple of things that are most important to you. So anybody want to have a reaction to this list of things? Are there things that aren't on there that pop out at you, or thoughts you have about this? Just unmute yourself and speak up.
Okay, I want to say that I'm considered many of these things. I'm sure we all have, but I'm planning now, while I'm still an able-bodied person making this decision, the things that I want when I have to, I won't move until I have to, or I think that's what I'm currently thinking, are very different from these. It's not going to matter anymore what I have access to. It's going to matter the kind of care that I'm able to get within the facility. It matters what kind of, particularly what kind of, if I'm able to have internet connectivity. Many of these issues I have found during the pandemic changed greatly for me in my consideration of them, because I can take them with me. But I'm not going to care anymore whether there's a gym or a pool or extra space for overnight visitors. I expect that I'm going to be homebound and so my primary care in one of these places is going to be, what's it like for people who are not going out, who are not physically able-bodied, and who need more specific kinds of care.
So let me see if I understand this. So you're sort of waiting on the decision and basically going to be moving when you need more care. And so who's going to be making the choice of where at that point in time do you envision?
If I'm mentally capable, I will do it. If I'm not, my children will do it.
Okay, so it's going to be very important to speak to your children about what's important to you about that, and if they live in different areas, where it's going to be. The thing is that what you're talking about is a move at a point when some of these things won't be important to you, but you want to make sure that you have good care. And you're probably speaking at that point, if you're speaking about being that compromised, either an assisted living or a nursing facility is what you're really discussing. And you're hoping to remain where you are independently as long as possible. That is an option, but it means that usually you will have fewer choices, because it will be where there's openings and availability to meet your need. And it usually happens because there's a fall or something else that pushes the decision. You might start looking into some of the places so that you have a preference list in advance. But for many people, they want something that they can age where they move, and that services are available to them if they should need more care as they move along. Did other people have a reaction to some of the items on the list? Did it stir anything for you?
Yes. Excuse me. As someone who's looking into this for myself, but also as the daughter of an elderly mother, I have a very negative reaction to taking into account leaving money for your heirs. And the reason I say this, my mom was brought up that if you don't have money to leave to your heirs, you're a failure. And as one of her two heirs, I've had a lot of trouble convincing her that both my brother and I are not in a situation where we need, I mean, I'm planning to not inherit anything from anyone. My brother is in a situation where it wouldn't make any difference to him. Our kids all have well-paying jobs. And it's driving me nuts that she wants to limit what she spends now so she won't be a failure by not leaving us things. And I've discussed this with my son, who earns more than I do. And the feeling is, you know, the best gift you can give your heirs, in my opinion, unless you're very well off, in which case it's a whole different ballgame, is to be able to spend the money so you can be as independent as possible while you're alive.
And that's, I think, a more modern position than your mom's generation was. But there are many people who are interested in the life care communities where you pay a big sum of money, usually from the sale of a house or a condominium, and some percentage, depending on the particular place, you get 80% or 90% is returned when you leave, which is somewhat euphemistically, it's generally when people die and it's left. And those people feel like they are then leaving some money. That is one option. Other people who don't have that point of view, either because they don't have the resources of that, or they need that money to pay for their care, or their children don't need to be inheriting it. But it is something that's a very individual issue and that people need to be thinking about and be clear about. And I think when you have the discussion next month, you'll get a better idea of what some of these places cost. But there is a great deal of variability in the cost for different kinds of situations. Other people in reactions to this list, thoughts about it, things we left off? Barbara. You're muted, yeah.
Yeah, I think two things that I just jumped out at me. One was climate, that some people want to think about where they want to live in terms of weather. And the second thing is age. At what age are you looking to do some long range planning? You could be looking in the next 3 years where, like myself, I'll be 75. As opposed to looking at this maybe from 80 or 85 or older. So I think age, your own age, is another factor in one of these that should be added.
Age is certainly, and I think we have down about timeline until the move, but you're right. The average age that people move into much of the housing that we're talking about, particularly if it's life care communities, it's generally early 80s is the typical age. I will share that so much is variable depending upon your health. A client of mine, a counseling client of mine who has early Parkinson's, and she's only in her late 60s. She's beginning to think about it because she knows it's a progressive disease and she wants to have some choices before it reaches the point that she needs to move and get additional help. The climate is an interesting thing because that can be about what kind of a community do you want to live in. Also, it can be urban or suburban. Where is it important to you to be? Are you moving out of the area to be near, to either choose better weather or to be near a family member? There are so many variables. The age thing, I want to come back to that for a minute. So a couple of anecdotes from over the years that I've experienced. I remember working with a woman who I had seen for some depression, and she responded to treatment and she was doing well. And she and her husband were living in Florida in the winter and in a condo in Chestnut Hill in the warmer weather. And they made the decision to move to a life care community when she was 90 and he was 92. And they moved in, and she was reconnected with me for some counseling because she was very anxious about the move and was very reluctant. The husband really was the driver of this move. And after she had been there about 6 months, she said, we made a real mistake in not moving here years earlier. She loved it. She got involved. They both did. She was taking French classes, writing for the newspaper. They were going to the gym. They were really using the facilities. They'd met lovely people that they were having dinner with most nights. And she was very happy. And unfortunately, after a year of living there, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And she said to me, her biggest regret was that she hadn't moved there 10 years earlier, that she didn't get to really enjoy all there was. So there's this issue about what's the right time and what's right for you. The other anecdote I want to share is finding a place that feels right to you. And that is a very subjective kind of experience. So I remember one woman who went to look at a life care community in the independent living section. And she heard that at that time, men had to wear a jacket to dinner. And that was it for her. She said, I can't move someplace that's much too formal. I'm a jeans kind of person. I don't want to have to think about getting dressed up and being there. And I think she was absolutely right. That was not going to be the right environment for her. You need to sort of see some of the places are much more, their activities and their programs are very intellectually oriented. There are some that really cater to ex-academics in the area. Is that going to be a good fit for you? Will you be comfortable? Are those your people? For some, it's what percentage of the population are Jewish might be an issue for some of you. That do you want to be at a place that offers Jewish services? Would you be uncomfortable if the place didn't have that, if there was a small number of Jews? You know, these are the kinds of things that if you're doing it in advance and you're taking the time and you're being a planner, you can look at and think of and visit and get a sense of whether this is a good fit for you. Other reactions, Fran?
Yeah, just to take the question of age a little further. I mean, we can hope that we will be healthy, and I agree that it's very hard to predict what age you'll need it, because you could be a very healthy 70-year-old one day and then incapacitated the next. But if we know the average age of the people who live in the facility we're looking at, it gives us a sense of it. So if you're in your 60s and the average age is the middle to high 80s, it might not be the place for you.
That's a really good point, and I think it's true. And keeping in mind that, is this place someplace that's been established and been around a long time, because people are going to be aging in place there. And so maybe they moved in when they were in around 80, but they're now, the place has been open for 10 years and they're now 90. And so how is that going to be? And is that an issue for you? These are all very important kinds of issues. Other reactions to the list, other thoughts, things we didn't include?
I would like to ask about deciding, what you need, but not wanting to be in one of those kind of communities. Aging in place in, an apartment somewhere, moving, but not to a community. That's another.
You mean
choice.
in your own apartment?
Yeah, living in your own apartment somewhere.
That's an option in
And
terms
think
of
of-
and there are a couple of things you can do with that. But that requires having more coordination of services. And there are groups, I don't know if any of you have heard of this organization called Kendall at Home. Anybody heard of that? You have, Judith, I see is nodding her head. Okay. Kendall at Home is one of these organizations. It's actually started by a Quaker group I believe in the Midwest, and they've moved into Massachusetts, and they're marketing pretty intensely. And I'm not clear what they're costing, but it's fairly expensive. But you sign up in advance and they guarantee that they will provide the care you need in your own home. That they will give you a care manager. They will hire the aides and provide what care you need in your home. But you have to do it in advance before you have the need and pay them a good sum of money to have this. Somehow they've worked it out that you get a tax deduction for it. And I don't know anybody who's actually utilized the services. I know of a few people who are looking into signing up for it because they were very committed to staying in their own condos and not moving. Other times people wait until they have a need, and they may hire a care manager, which provide somebody who's going to help assess what your care needs are and hire people to provide them for you, to coordinate the services. Because the issue is of staying in your home, getting the level of care you need. And you might not have you won't have the social experiences that you would if you're living in any kind of a community, whether it's an assisted living or an independent living community. You won't have that socialization. Having aides coming in and providing for your physical care, these are generally not people who are going to give you the kind of emotional support and stimulation that you might get from your peers. So it's a trade-off about it. And that's why it's important to know what's most important to you and to be thinking about it and looking into communities. Have most of you visited people who are in various types of communities? Have you been to some of the life care communities around, some of the senior housing around?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Has anybody not been? I can't see everybody's face. Okay. Yeah, we can't see everyone. If you haven't visited places, I would really encourage you to take a look. There's everybody. Okay, it's lovely to see the group as a whole. Go and walk into, right next to your temple is 1550 Beacon Street, that's run by Hebrew Senior Life Center Communities of Brookline, or walk into 100 Center Street, or go to Brown House on Harvard Street next to KI, which is, somebody's looking. Do you all know about Brown House? Okay, To Life, which used to be called Jewish Community Housing for the Elderly. They opened a year ago, Brown House, which is on the corner next to KI. They took down part of that building, and they have like 60-something units of housing that some's affordable, some's market rate. But if you go into any of these places, you'll get a sense about the activities, the programming that they have, what it feels like, what life looks like. Going into buildings can give you a real sense of whether you could envision yourself there. Are these your kind of people? It's very important. And when you go looking at places that have meal programs, whether it's a life care community or an assisted living or whatever, have a meal there. Get a feel for what the dining room is like. Are people engaged with each other? Are they talking? Are they having a good time? You will get a real sense of it. Somebody just put up about the new concept that To Life is having in Newton, that somebody got a mailer about it called Opus. I know next month you're going to be discussing the specific options. Opus is in the planning stage from To Life. It is a new kind of community that they're building right near where the JCC is in Newton. If people are familiar with the JCC in Newton, it's going to be built over there. There's like a dirt parking lot or something, and they've just gotten the first level of approval from the city of Newton to move ahead. And it's going to be organized a little differently than some other life care communities, and they're trying to make it more affordable for middle-class people, unlike some of them like Newbridge, that's very, very expensive. So if you're interested, I would respond to that email and get some more information about it. I guess they're having people give a refundable $500 deposit if they're maybe interested in going to get on a priority kind of list and be part of the planning for this. But I can't give you any more details. Maybe the people speaking next month will be able to answer more questions about that.
Marsha, Jamie Hodges had her hand up for a while, so just calling attention to that.
Thank you. Go ahead. I can't hear you, Janie. You're muted.
Sorry, now can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes.
Hi. When you, because not knowing what the time frame is exactly, I'm with my husband, but I have a condition called smoldering multiple myeloma, which right now is not, with direct symptoms, but very well might be advanced, by 5 years or less. I don't know. So what happens if I'm wanting to look at places, life care, but if you come up on the waiting list too early, what happens to your place?
Most of them you can defer, but I will tell you with life care communities, because they operate sort of like an insurance company in a sense. They're counting on people spending most of the time in independent living, which is less costly, obviously, than assisted living or nursing unit. And most of them require several years of your medical records. And if they think you're too likely to develop a need soon for either assisted living or the nursing unit, they may not admit you. So that's where it gets to be this tricky thing about you need to go in when you're healthy, because they won't take you. I used to joke at a place, I won't even say which place it was, that the apartments they would go to show people were down the longest corridor because they wanted to make sure you could walk. And many of these places, you can't, the life care communities, you can't move in if you need a wheelchair or a walker. If you develop the need for it while you're living there, fine, but they won't accept anybody to move in right off with it. So when you already have a diagnosis, Janie, you're in a sort of tricky situation that it could inhibit your options as far as that.
Already.
But generally speaking, if your name comes up and you're not ready, you can postpone it and say, tell me when the next apartment. And some people are pickier than others. You know, these places have variabilities of whether it's 1 bedroom or a studio or 2 bedrooms or all these other little things. And there can be quite a long wait for some of them.
Okay,
Other people, yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Donna, you've had your hand up.
Donna? No?
One thing that hasn't been mentioned that I think is really important, given especially how diverse the TBC community is. If you're gay or a person of color or some other underrepresented group, it's really important to get a sense of how things are, because there are some places where it can be very uncomfortable to be gay, or if you're the only person who's of a certain racial or ethnic group, it can be very isolating. Similarly, when you talked about meals, if you have any food allergies, check out whether they can accommodate them, or whether if you're not going to be able to eat their food, you can opt out of paying for them.
Those are really important things. And there is a growing number of communities that are actually targeted to particular groups like the LGBT community, because there have been issues with it. But you do want to know if that applies to you, or if it's important to you that you're in a diverse community, whether you get a sense, are they a welcoming community? Is diversity valued there? Even if you're not a member of a smaller community, you may want to feel like that's a place that's accepting of it. And testing out the meals is very important, and having a sense whether that's going to fit. Absolutely. Very good points, Meredith. Thank you. Yeah, Fran.
Oh, Judith had her hand up first.
Who did?
Judith?
Sorry.
That's okay, right?
Go ahead, Judith.
I just want to say that another consideration is size. I'm looking at 2 different places. One of them has 45 units. One of them has a great many more. And my daughter, who works in the CCRC, reminds me that if you go to a place with 45 units and you don't find a community, there are people that you like, you're in a small place, and that's less likely. The other thing, I think it's particularly important for some of us to check out the library. It's a great indicator of who is there. And it may come as a tremendous surprise to you. The other thing is that when I went to Newbridge, I was told that I couldn't afford it. The intake person also told me, well, you can go to Orchard Cove. It's exactly the same. but it has all the same facilities, but it's X many thousands of dollars less. And I said, how can it be exactly the same if it's X many thousands of dollars less? And she said to me, well, this is in Dedham or somewhere, and this is in Canton. Honey, I live in Boston. I don't know what these communities are. Once I'm in there, what's the difference? I really have a problem with that. But if you care about the social name of the place that you're going to be, if it's important for you to be in Dedham, you should be in Dedham.
Good points. Who is next? Fran?
When you mentioned Kendall at home, I don't know anything about Kendall at home, but I know there's, what's been called the Beacon Hill model.
Yep.
And it's been copied throughout the country. And we have our version of it in Jamaica Plain called JP at Home. And I just looked up their website and saw that they see themselves as also covering Rosendale, West Roxbury, Hyde Park, Mission Hill, Roxbury, and Brookline. And it's all for aging in place. I have not signed on. I think if I felt I was closer to needing services, but I've certainly been encouraged to by people who have signed on to support it and for the social activities that are included. So it's connected with Ethos, which is a service agency that was always paid to serve low income elderly, but expanded their services in association with JP at Home. So I wanted to mention that. And also, there's also I guess what you would call the naturally occurring aging communities, which are like in Jamaica Plain, we have a high rise. Our one high rise in Jamaica Plain is a place where lots of people who are selling their homes are moving to. And in a place like Brookline, if there could just be some good dense housing. I worked in affordable housing in Brookline for 15 years. So if the community would just allow some good dense housing, Coolidge Corner is the most wonderful place for a naturally occurring older community, which would also support the commercial development there.
So in Brookline, there's Brookline Community Aging Network. And they do a lot of things like that. Many of the buildings in Brookline, naturally, the high-rise buildings, whether condos or rental, have a bit of a community involvement with them. There's some activities, and the older residents who are home are gathered together and have some programming in their buildings. I've heard of somebody who moved from Cambridge and is in a building on Beacon Street, and she's in a book group with other people in her building. She's actually the youngest. She's in her mid-70s, and most of the people in her book group are in their 80s and 90s who've lived in the building for a number of years. And that does form this. The issue with the Beacon Hill communities and all of those, and Brookline does not have a formal one of those programs. Newton does, that it is dependent to great extent on volunteers and piecing together services. And again, it becomes of what are you looking for? So, and what is it that you anticipate needing? And do you need your meals done? Do you need your main meal a day provided for you? Do you need housekeeping? Do you need the linen, somebody to change your bedding? How important is it to have the social activities right in the building? These are all things that are very individual. Somebody mentioned checking out the library, very important. And if there's anything else that's important to you, whether it's for some people, the pool or the gym, is very important, that it keeps people functioning and that they really value their workouts. And is that important to you? What are the variables? But there are many buildings in the area that have a large number of seniors, and often they form informal networks of support for each other. When we're off the call today, a friend who lives a few blocks from me is having surgery and asked if I could give, she can't drive, if I could give her a ride for her pre-op blood work. So of course I'm doing that. You know, so we all form, all of you, I'm sure, have informal people that you can call for a certain amount. It's a question of how much and how consistent do you need the care. Other thoughts, questions?
I'm going to
Yeah,
intervene, Marsha, Rachel
Sure.
and Barbara.
go ahead.
Right.
Rachel?
So,
Rachel.
you know, looking back at the list you posted at the beginning, for me, one of the things that's most important is being able to stay where I am, in part because I don't drive. So I'm not about to start driving now, and I live in the Coolidge Corner area where, as long as I'm able, I can walk to just about anything that I need. But equally importantly is that my concern with some of the places that, you know, have sort of different levels of care and community is they're not accessible with public transportation. And so it means that people who I am in community with now may have difficulty getting to see me. And then the other factor for me that I sort of try to keep in mind is I have a younger sister who lives in New York City, an older sister who lives in central Missouri. And it's hard to project, you know, to what extent we're going to need to want to support each other as we age. So I sort of feel like if I stay put and look at options for being able to age in place, that I'm sort of leaving my more options open, but I don't know that that's really true.
Well, I think we never know till after the fact whether it's true or not. I would encourage you to have conversations with your sisters about their thinking and, you know, what do they sort of envision about it. You're right. Most of the life care communities are in suburban areas because they need to have enough land to build on. You know, so that's not going to happen in Brookline. There's not the capacity to have that. Although I understand they are some company, and I can't recall the name of it, that's from the Midwest, I believe, is developing the Fisher Hill site.
Oh,
Has any of you heard of this in Brookline? Do you all know where Fisher Hill is? Yeah, no? Fisher Hill is lovely, actually. There's a lovely little park you can walk around there with beautiful foliage. If you go up Beacon Street on Dean Street alongside the Episcopal Church. Yes, the former Newberry College site, exactly. And you take a left on Fisher Hill Street, and there's a park there, and on one side was where Newberry College was, and that site's being developed into a life care community. I have no idea what the pricing is going to be like or where they're at in the development of it, but it's a lovely area of Brookline, and there's a lot of talk about what else might be put up there, but that's going to be a more urban kind of a location than the one in Dedham or Canton or Lexington or some of the other places that are around. There's also rental units. There are rental units of independent living. There's one in Coolidge Corner, in Cleveland Circle, near where the movie theater used to be.
Very expensive.
Yes, it's very expensive. And so it's a rental, and most of the rental ones are pretty expensive, and they have a range of services. And one of the things, they often have people who drive within a 5-mile or an 8-mile radius, you can reserve and get a ride to an appointment or to visit someone. And that's important for some people who aren't able to utilize public transportation easily and don't have a car. But knowing what's important to you is a really crucial kind of a thing. There was
Yeah,
somebody
so
else.
Barbara
Yeah,
Sturfield?
so I just want to reinforce what Marsha said, because I work in a lot of these places. I go into them and it's like when you were younger and you were looking for a home, your private home. I would highly recommend one day, couple days, take some time and just go and visit these places and see what it feels like to you. Marsha mentioned that before. You can have your agenda about all of these things, but when you walk in, check in with your gut and see how you feel when you walk in. So checklist, but
it's
really
interesting, Barbara, when
Marsha, wait, just let me finish. So the point is that your gut will tell you, like Marsha says, do I feel like I belong here? Is this a place that I feel comfortable with? And you will get a vibe when you walk in the door or walk around and talk to people. Like, my suggestion is not to talk to the staff, but to talk to residents who live there. You'll get the truth. That's my 2 cents.
No, it's a really good point. I say those of you who either yourselves or with your children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews went on college tours, it's sort of the same kind of thing that I can recall going with my son, and there were places that he just was turned off to certain things or didn't even look like the other kids on the campus. You want to know whether it's a fit. And like Meredith said about are there people from other groups, or is it a lily white population? And is that something you're comfortable with of being part of? I think Barbara's making a really good point. Your gut is going to steer you right. And the same thing about sitting and having a meal there. You will get a flavor of what the atmosphere is. It a welcoming community? Are people nice to each other? How do they treat the staff? Particularly, how do they treat staff like in the dining room? That will tell you a great deal about the population. And, some of these places that are particularly the rental independent living, if people live there for a long time, they often don't want to move to an assisted living or a nursing home when they need more care. And so they hire aides if they have the financial resources to do that. And so then the atmosphere of the place changes a little. So let's say this is an independent living that's been open 10, 15 years, and there are people who've aged in place. How are you going to feel if you're wanting to move to an independent, active place, and many of the people have assistive devices, aids, and need a lot more care, but they're able to stay there in a rental because they're paying to have more care provided? But are those your people? Is that what you want for yourself? So spending time is very well worth doing it. Other thoughts, questions, comments?
One of the thoughts that I had, and when you had asked whether you had gone to some of these places in the past, when I went there, I was looking for a place for my mother.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking at it through a very different lens. I'd like to think it was compassionate and understanding. However, it wasn't where I was going to live. One of the things that I've noticed also with some other aging relatives, the different communities seem to be more, and this may relate to what Judith is saying about wanting to stay where I am as long as I'm capable, and then only moving when I need to, that more reactive, but necessary mode. A lot of different communities are more, if you will, isolated and enclosed, or if you go to visit somebody on a holiday, everybody's got relatives someplace, and there are just a handful of people left in the assisted living. So I don't know how fluid the membrane is surrounding the communities that we're considering.
Mhm.
And I don't know how you pick up on that through a visit, because I also agree, it's good to go and see, but even when you're buying a house, it's good to see what it looks like on a weekend and a weekday, because they may be very different.
Mhm.
So it's just another thing that occurs to me that I'd like to think about.
I think you've made a lot of good points about that, and it's not a one-time visit and going at different times, and depending on your circumstances. If you're somebody who has family in the area who's going to take you out for Thanksgiving, you're going to care less about, well, how do they handle Thanksgiving? And if you go to Thanksgiving, are you going to be one of 4 people in the dining room because everybody's gone out, and how is that going to feel for you? These are all valuable kinds of things. And how important is that to you? I think defining what is really important to you is what I urge you to take away, and with looking at that list of saying what's really important. I'll share with all of you, I'm in the same age group, and my only child, my son, lives in California. And I used to joke that I would move out there, but then he'd probably move to Hawaii or Australia. And you don't want to move, and then what? You're going to follow them around if they're not settled. But as he's getting older, and if they buy a house in the area they're in now and settle, I sort of have in my head that in 10 years, I will look to, and assuming my health is stable for those 10 years, to move to some kind of a community near them so that they don't have to try to manage my care long distance, because I was a long distance caregiver with my parents and in-laws, and it's really hard to do. And so if you have children, or nieces or nephews are often wonderful, who you're close to, who you want to be the person who, when you can't make decisions, is making decisions, does it make sense to think of moving near them? And having that kind of conversation ahead of time is another thing to be thinking about. Muriel.
Marsha, I love the way you started the program complimenting us on being planners. And I forgot the alternative to planners.
Reactors.
But I really picked up on 2 points that I want to stress to the group. One is you should go and look around and see what's out there if you're planning to be local. But the other important thing you said, which might have not been taken in by all of us, is there could be a 5-year waiting list for any of these places. And even if you have no intention of moving, you can get your name on the waiting list. And when they offer you a place, if they have a place 3 or 4 or 5 years hence, you can make a decision. What would you respond to that? Because I want people to get the takeaway that many of these housing places that we're going to hear about in 2 weeks, or no, not 2 weeks, in December, they have very long waiting lists. And you mentioned that and you stressed that. But I think it's important to say you can get on the waiting list and you can turn down the offer if it doesn't suit you when it's made to you.
Well, and it depends. For affordable housing, there's a very long wait list, and you're just on the list and you don't have to put any money up. For life care communities, you often have to put a deposit down that is refundable if you withdraw your name and decide you don't want to go. But there can be they want to know you're serious about it. And so they do require a deposit. And that means they keep you in the loop about if they're doing new building or about how long the wait might be. And you can specify if you want a 1-bedroom unit or a 2-bedroom unit, all those kinds of things in it. But it's a very good point. It's just hard for most of us who are living independently to think about the idea of a time when we might need more help, and to think about making a move to a senior community. Rachel's raising the issue about the wait list rules for public housing are different. When you speak about public housing, are you speaking like about Brookline Housing Authority? Their
Yes.
senior housing? Yeah, those are very strict income guidelines. A lot of the housing, for example, center communities, which you'll hear about next month. I don't want to steal their thunder, but center communities has a mix of housing, as does 2 Life, where some is affordable, some is market rate, some is subsidized based on your income. There are also with public housing and with federally supported housing, which is both 2 Life and Center communities to some degree, there are criteria. So for example, if somebody's living in a 2-family house and something has happened and they can't manage the stairs any longer, they'll move up on the waiting list above somebody. If somebody is experiencing domestic abuse, they can move up on the waiting list. They're given priority. If their building has been sold, that's an important thing. Judith is saying, and I didn't see the whole thing about memory test to get in. What were you saying, Judith?
Brookhaven has a cognitive test. You have to be able to not to be showing signs of dementia or even a memory loss.
Most of the places have that. I know LaSalle does. And that's the issue with waiting too long. A friend of mine attempted to move her mom, it was to LaSalle a number of years ago, from her apartment in New York. And she waited too long. She didn't pass the cognitive test. They wouldn't admit her to independent living. And while that seems harsh, on the other hand, do you want to move if you're cognitively intact into independent living and have a lot of people with dementia around and it feels like a dementia unit? So it's a balancing act about it. So, but knowing the time is so difficult, which is why looking in advance, and as Muriel said, getting on waiting list so that you have options, because you don't know how you're going to feel in a couple of years. Other thoughts?
I just want to say something about moving to be near your children. You also need to know yourself well enough to know that if your children are very busy and have very engaged lives, and do not show up at least once a week to visit you, that you are going to be hurt and angry and sorry that you ever moved to Portland, Oregon. So I think Zoom has been I can take TBZ and the Athenaeum and the Yiddish Book Center with me when I go to Portland. I'm not so worried anymore about beating up on my poor daughter.
I appreciate your honesty. Yes.
Marsha, I have to say that you are a fountain of wisdom, and this has been an incredibly rich and wonderful conversation. And I can't even thank you enough. I know that you have a friend that you have to attend to, so I think we're going to move to our very final phase of this, which is actually, I'm going to just announce that people should definitely tune into part 2 of this program, which is going to be December 14th at 7:30 p.m. And we have invited a number of different housing organizations to come and present. And I hope it won't be overwhelming, but I think it will give everybody a sense of some of what's out there. So we're looking forward to seeing you back and to seeing other people as well. And I want to turn to Rafti Ferret to give us a very beautiful and inspirational closing from our tradition.
And brief, because I know you have to go.
And brief.
So I realize this might feel fraught as we're thinking about these things. And I've been thinking about this with my mom for the last 10 years already. But there's such comfort to be had from our tradition. You know, there's so much richness. And when we think about the roots of Judaism, right? Abraham left everything that he knew as home and went on to have another phase of life. Yaakov in this week's Torah portion goes off to leave everything he thought was home and goes to have another life. And then he does it again when he's an elder, leaves everything he knew as home to have another phase of life. The Jewish people, the Israelites, left everything they knew as home in Egypt and wandered in the wilderness. And then when the temples were destroyed twice, we left everything we knew as home and started again. And as we were chased out of country to country, we left everything behind and created home again. And Hashem says in the Torah, "Va'asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham." When you make a place to dwell, for me to dwell, then I will dwell amongst you. Right. And so like that reminds us that home isn't about the four walls necessarily that surround us, but about our communities, about our values, about those things and the places where we can find Hashem dwelling amongst us. So I want to bless you all with clarifying those values and finding those places that you can make room to dwell with Hashem.
Thank you, Rafti Ferret. That was beautiful. That was really beautiful. Thank you all for showing up. I hope you'll show up again on December 14th. And if you have any ideas for other programs that you would like Aging and Community to present, please let us know. Please send your email to Rafti Ferret and she'll pass it on to the committee. And one final pitch, if anybody is interested in joining the Aging and Community Committee and has ideas about programs, please let me know. We would really welcome people.
Donna's raising her hand.
Well, Donna, send Rafti Ferret an email and she'll forward it to me, okay? Thank you all for showing up and
Thank you. This is great.
to all of you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak with all of you. It was a pleasure to meet all of you.
You were fabulous, Marsha. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Very tired social work.